From your local election headquarters, this is Big Country Politics on KTAB.
All right, we're back on Big Country Politics. We're talking impeachment with Dr. Paul Fabrizio with McMurray University political science professor. And what a perfect time to have you on, because you're catching us up on impeachment before the big day, right now on Tuesday, that we've talked about in our last segment.
Right, don't hold me to that.
Because that could change.
That could change.
You said that right off the bat. And a lot has changed in this whole process. But we're up to that day, Tuesday, right now, where they decided to go forward. And you kind of explained a little bit about what's next. Kind of go through that again.
Okay, so the House of Representatives would vote on whether they're going to impeach the president.
That's the big historic day on Tuesday so far.
Right. Then the next step is it goes to the U.S. Senate. And the senators then act as jurors. There would be some members.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we need to look at them in a different way.
Okay.
There'll be a couple of members of the House of Representatives who will go over to the Senate. They will become the prosecutors. The president will appoint some of his lawyers. They will become his defenders. The senators are the jurors, and then the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, will be the judge, and they'll hold a trial. And right now there's a big debate going on. Do you want a big, long trial, 4 to 6 weeks? Do you want a short trial that lasts 2 weeks? That all still has to be worked out by the Senate, and they have not announced what they're going to do yet. So, but at the end of it, they will take a vote on those 2 articles of impeachment. Do you convict the president or do you acquit the president? And if they vote to acquit, then the whole thing's over. And that's likely to what is going to happen. If they vote to convict, then it takes 2/3 of the senators, so 67 senators, then the president would leave office and could not serve again as president.
It's unimaginable.
Yeah, that's never happened in American history. And the other thing is that if that happens, Mike Pence then becomes the president. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. The politics are not there. But that's what would happen, could happen.
So there's also talk about the president and his team not participating in this process.
Okay.
Can that happen?
Well, we need to be careful. The president and his team are not participating in what's taking place in the House of Representatives.
Okay.
Because that's controlled by the Democrats.
Okay.
When it goes to the Senate, that's controlled by the Republican Party. They're the majority. So therefore, the president's team is going to cooperate with them. The president will participate.
Okay.
And the question really is how much of a defense is the president going to be allowed to put on? Because some in the White House are talking about getting Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden to testify
I heard
at that trial. And Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, says, no, we don't need to do that. Let's keep it much calmer, quieter. Let's just get this done as quickly as possible and move on.
Okay. So we've talked about what happens if the president is convicted. He'll have to leave office. We've decided that's not going to happen. We won't hold you to it. Let's talk about if he's acquitted.
Okay.
Where do we go from there? I mean, then it is just PR at that point? I mean, for the president? to be reelected in 2020?
Yeah, because he's then on the ballot to run for reelection. And remember, this is our 3rd impeachment that we're going through. Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. Neither of them ran for reelection after their impeachment. So Donald Trump running for reelection would be a new thing. But the sense is that it would take place. The Republicans are hoping it's done by the middle of January. And then it's still another 10 months until the election. So a lot of people might forget about it. The Republicans are hoping they can use it to energize their base to get Trump supporters out to the polls in November. The Democrats are saying, hopefully this will expose the president for what he is, and we need to replace him with somebody else. But the Democrats still have to come up with a nominee, and they haven't done that yet.
We have a couple of minutes, about a minute and a half now, and I want to talk to you about the crowded field of Democrats. I mean, how does somebody keep track of that? I mean, we're trying to keep track of the impeachment. This is going on. I mean, they have debates going on. Such a crowded field.
It is such a crowded field. There's a real problem with all the members trying to get money so that they continue to appear on TV. Remember, the impeachment is going to dominate things in January, and the first voting takes place in Iowa the very first week of February.
That's important.
We're entering a really quick phase where things are going to be happening quickly. So with all those Democrats running, and there's a huge process, and there's this guy, Michael Bloomberg, excuse me, with $100 million that he's going to spend. What do we do? How does, if you're not Michael Bloomberg, how do you get attention? There's a president who tweets and gets a lot of attention. Michael Bloomberg spends money on commercials, gets attention. If you're Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden, how do you get attention? How is that going to be possible? So it's going to be a really difficult thing for those candidates to get attention as we move forward.
Go ahead.
No, at some point we'll have to talk about the convention that'll take place in the summer.
Okay.
Because right now there's a possibility that that convention, people go into it without a clear idea of who the Democratic nominee is going to be. Nobody will have enough delegates. And it could be really confusing then.
About 30 seconds left, if that. Do you see a front runner in the Democratic Party?
Right now, Joe Biden is the front runner. He's got solid support from about 25 to 30% of the delegates. That's not enough to win, but it's enough to keep him going and going and going.
Does anybody in the Democratic Party have what it takes, and they're wrapping this up, to beat President Trump?
Too soon
hard
to
to
tell.
say,
It's
right?
hard to say.
All right, Dr. Paul Fabrizio, thank you very much for clearing this up for us.
You're welcome.
All right, we will be back on Big Country Politics.